Hello, everybody. So, as all of our listeners know, Halloween is one of the biggest and one of the most beloved franchises of all time. Today, we have an interview with Wayne Byrne, who wrote "You Can't Kill the Boogeyman," uh, the ongoing Halloween saga, 13 movies and counting. It's out September 4th in the US with Amazon Kindle and hardcover. Is that the best place people can get that on September 4th?
I would say yes, because the dates have kind of changed over
Oh,
the
okay.
last few weeks for various reasons. So it kind of went from August 7th to September. So I'm still seeing August. So we might
Oh,
meet that deadline just yet. But I guess if you order from Amazon or directly from Bloomsbury, you'll get it as soon as it hits.
yeah. So pre-order the book. We got a copy of it, and it was really cool. I really loved it. I loved the style of it. Um,
Okay.
but I wanted to talk to you about the book and also really interested in kind of the research aspect of it. And we'll kind of get into that because it's there's so much information about Halloween, the franchise, out there. So to create something new and authentic, it can be tough. But I think you did a really good job on it. But to start, of all the horror franchises you could write about, why'd you choose Halloween?
Well, I have been with my writing career. I've been going through all the things that meant something to me growing up, which influenced me in some really emotional or impactful way. And one of those subjects that I wrote about was A Nightmare on Elm Street, that franchise. And that did quite well. It, got to number one on various Amazon charts, and it got some good reviews and good feedback from the fans. So because of that, I got an agent. And when you do something that's seen to be successful, they want you to do more of it. So
I love that.
yeah, and my agent was like, would you be interested in doing more franchise stuff? Because this is kind of, it's kind of a popular thing right now. And I was kind of, I always have several topics and subjects ahead of my brain, as to what I want to do. And I don't necessarily think in those terms of, well, if that was successful, I'm going to do something like that again. So I wasn't really thinking about doing more franchise books. It just wasn't really kind of on my radar. And then, he was like, Elm Street did really well. I'd love to work with you and etc. So we got together and he kind of came up with some ideas. And he threw all these franchises out there to me, and I thought about them. And the thing is, when you're settling on an idea for a project, you kind of have to think, well, essentially, this is the thing I'm going to be spending a year with, because with all my books, I give myself a year. I think it's long enough to kind of do the research, get the interviews done, and watch the films as many times as you need to. But it gets your ass in gear. It's a short enough period to kind of really kind of motivate you to just get the work done.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to think about all these different franchises that he was saying that the publishers are interested in right now. And I thought about some of them, and they're like, well, I really liked them. In some cases, I loved them. And I was like, but do I want to spend a year with just those movies? Because that's what I tend to do. Once I decide on a project, I kind of shut myself off and I just spend a year with that material. And of all of those, I kind of thought, well, there's only really one franchise I think at the moment I would be willing to do that with, and that's Halloween, because again, it comes back to the fact that it was something I grew up with. One of my earliest memories is, and I think I might have mentioned it in the introduction of the book, is that my father introduced me to Halloween 3 at a very young age. I think I was 4 or 5. I remember the day vividly. He picked me up from school, and this was like, in Ireland, it's called senior infants. So I don't know what that equates to in the American school system, but basically I was 4 or 5. And he said that he recorded something on VHS off the TV the night before and that I might like. And so I watched it, and it was Halloween 3. And at that stage, I didn't know anything about Halloween, of course. I didn't know anything about Michael Myers. So this was my introduction to Halloween. And as you can imagine, Halloween 3 is, to our contemporary eyes, still batshit crazy. But can you imagine to a 4-year-old, 5-year-old's mind? It was just insane. So, but I loved it because I had that kind of hokey kind of Irishness about it that I immediately recognized. Even I was that young, and I also recognized Dan O'Herlihy because he was a star to us here in Ireland.
Yeah.
You know, especially having made it over to Hollywood and been in these various movies. So he was a face I recognized. You see, my dad was very much into his movies, and I was not sporty. I was not academic as a child and into my adulthood. So we kind of bonded a lot and still do over our love of movies. You know, my dad is a quiet man, and let's reference The Quiet Man itself. John Ford's The Quiet Man. He introduced me to a lot of John Ford films earlier on. And it was kind of our way of, and like I say, it still is the thing that bonds us. It's movies. You know, we could spend a couple of hours together and just throw on some movies. And that's our love.
That's awesome.
Our emotional bond. But he turned me on to Halloween 3. And from there, that would have been around the same time that Halloween 4 came out on VHS over here. And of course, I used to prowl the VHS stores every week with my dad. And as soon as I saw the box, as soon as I saw the Halloween title, it twigged something. It wasn't Michael Myers, because at that stage I didn't know about Michael Myers. So he rented Halloween 4 for me. And that became a whole new thing. You know, I was like mind blown. What is this? This is amazing. And not long after that, Halloween 5 came out. So there was something new straight away then I could follow it with.
Yeah.
You know, so it went from Halloween 3 off the TV. Halloween 4 had just come out on VHS. Halloween 5 pretty much straight afterwards almost. And it was just this roller coaster for about a year or so, year and a half, of living with and loving these Halloween movies. So it really kind of engendered this love of horror movies for me. And it was around the same time then that I discovered Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And that kick-started my love of the Elm Street franchise. So I had these two franchises that were really, when I think about it now, I associate them on many emotional levels. You know, it's with my dad, it was my upbringing, they were my friends almost. Because like I say, I wasn't a social kid. I wasn't out on a sports team, or I wasn't out doing, you know, academic things with other friends. It was just, I had my movies. And, you know, all these years later, when it just came up, the spark of an idea, you know, from my agent, he said, how about Halloween? And I said, that makes sense to me. I can work with that. And not only that, but I kind of knew some of the people who had worked on the movies. So I knew straight away I would be able to talk to them. And my whole thing with all my books is really highlighting the effort of filmmakers, craftsmen, artists who I feel deserve more celebration. And for me, it was an opportunity to celebrate Dean Cundy, Dwight H. Little, Phil Parmet, you know, Peter Lyons-Collister, people like that who, outside of their Halloween work, have done amazing work as well. So that's really the kind of catalyst for me, was this is a chance to celebrate great filmmaking and great filmmakers and do it in the context of the Halloween franchise. And you can kind of chart the progression of the franchise in culture and in the film industry, and at the same time trace the development of these guys' careers, because this was, for a lot of them, the starting point for really, really good careers in Hollywood.
Yeah, there was I forget his name. I wish I wrote it down. One of the things at the beginning of the book that stood out in terms of what you were just talking about, the unsung, was what was his name? He was like a synthesizer specialist, and it was like synthesizers were like new on the scene, and that connection. And I was like, wow, that's something I've never heard before, and like his involvement and helping with that. I thought that was like a really cool detail.
That would have been Alan Harrott, I presume.
Yes,
so
that's it.
He kind of came in on Halloween 2 after having worked with Carpenter somewhat on, I think it was Escape from New York.
Yes.
So, and again, he had this background as this kind of emerging synthesizer guy, you know, so he was working with Weather Report and all these amazing musicians. So within that circle of kind of well-regarded musicians, you know, he was in there and kind of pioneering. You know, this was the era of, and it kind of relates to my other book that's coming out in a few months, is tracing the development of film music in the history of American cinema, but particularly from the 1960s to the 90s. And that's where you had the decline of kind of classical music and orchestrations.
Yeah.
And you have in the new Hollywood era of the 60s and the 70s, you have songs coming in, but also in the mid 70s, then you start getting synthesizers. You know, you think of like Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange and things like that. So electronica was coming in, and Alan was kind of rode that wave a little bit. You know, it was the right time for him to kind of, and Carpenter as well also did that, because it was the right time that synthesizer music, electronic music, could provide a score. You didn't need, 50-piece orchestras or whatever it is that was the tradition in Hollywood.
Right.
You could have one guy or two guys, in the case of the Halloween franchise sometimes, just with a bank of synthesizers, creating this really unique score. I mean, one of the things about Halloween is, and Carpenter's music in general on all of the soundtracks, is that it's so him. It's so identifiably him. You know, nobody else, if anybody else does that, you go, oh, he's ripping off Carpenter.
Yeah, 100%.
That's the great artist. If you can be so unique and original that, like, that's your stamp, that's your signature.
Yeah.
You know, and Alan was able to really work great with Carpenter, because Carpenter appreciated not only his musical chops, but his musical background and the people he worked with. You know, because he came to Hollywood in, I think, 79. So the first film he worked on was Star Trek, the motion picture. You know, so that's a good first credential right there.
Yeah.
Working on the sound effects for that.
Oh, he did like the light speed or whatever. It's
warp speed, yeah.
Warp speed, yeah. That was cool.
So he did that using synthesizers. So he was using synths as not just for melody, but for effects as well. So he really worked with Carpenter great, and Carpenter brought him in, on Halloween 2 because he was busy with the thing. So Alan then worked on the rest of the movies up to The Curse. So.
Oh, yeah. So that's super cool. I wanted to just go back to the Halloween 3 introduction, because I think that's the most Irish thing of all time, is starting at Halloween 3. That is incredible, being from Ireland and being like, we'll start here. This is a good starting point.
It makes sense, man, because when you look at a character like Dan Chalice, he's the ultimate Irish hero, because he's not your typical Hollywood hero. He's not. He's not especially. He's not pretty. He's not a pretty boy. So he looks like an average Irish guy who enjoys his whiskey in the morning, takes a 6-pack when he's going on a heroic mission. So we can identify here.
Yeah, 100%. Where in Ireland are you from? My family is all from Ireland.
Oh, so. I'm in County Kildare, which is kind of just west of Dublin, so not far from Dublin City. Okay,
cool. Yeah, my family was all in Cork.
So you're down on the west coast. Very nice place, beautiful place.
So, so that was you knocked off like 3 questions there for me. So, the opening of the book, you talk about it not being a definitive history, more of like a critical or cultural celebration of it. Can you talk about like the decision there for that structure or tone? I think you explain it pretty well in the book, but just for people, because I'll just give a little background. You do mention, as I mentioned before, these books are out there. There's a million of them out there, and you went to try and do something different.
Yeah. And that was exactly it. I know, as a fan of Halloween and a fan of other franchises, that once you're a fan and you get so invested in these franchises and these films, you seek it all out. You buy every book, you watch every documentary, all extra features on the DVDs and all that. So it's very hard for somebody to come up with something new and original. And I never once for a second thought I could do a definitive overview of the Halloween franchise. You would need, I think, many years to do so.
Yeah.
To really, like, if you wanted to track down everybody involved, which is nigh on impossible, and really kind of dig into all the intricacies of the characters and the mythologies and everything and all that. So straight away, when I talked to my agent about this, I said to him, this has to be, if I'm doing this book, it has to be the way I do my books, which is looking at the artistry, looking at the people who make the movies, and to see what it is they bring to the respective movies, and how each movie has its own aesthetic and resolve and all that kind of thing. That was my way in. I'm all about the filmmaking and the artistry, less so about the mythologies, because I think you can never be entirely sure of the mythologies, because we'll always speculate, we'll always come up with our ideas and our theories, and that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah.
We want to keep watching these movies and mining for things that we go, oh wow, that means something, and we try and connect it. So I don't think it would be good for any writer to come up with a definitive, a definitive idea of what these movies mean, because we wouldn't want that taken away from us. To look at, say, the Torn trilogy, and looking at this kind of new mythology that they brought in and all the subtexts that are going on, that's the fun of it. That's why we come back to these movies. We want to kind of keep digging and exploring. You don't want, or I don't think I would want a writer to go, this is why this happens and this is connected to this. And, I didn't want to be prescriptive. I wanted to go, these movies were made by these people, and this is how they did it. And then this is my idea of what it is. Because I talk a little bit about the themes in there. But in that preface that you referenced, it is really just, at the end of the day, my ideas on these movies. It's not definitive. I can't say to anybody that this is what Halloween, say, 6 is about, or 4, or 1, And I think one of the great things about that for me was, say, for example, you look at part 1, and Carpenter didn't want any kind of intellectualizing or philosophical subtext going in there. So you don't really go there, because, I can give some ideas of what I think are presented to us. But again, my preface was to say, this is not definitive, this is me. But then you look at, say, Rob Zombie's remake, the first one, and there's a ton of subtext. There's a ton of sociological stuff in there that was ripe for somebody like me to kind of dig into. Now, again, I don't know if Zombie intended that, but that's just, it's the privilege you have as a critic or a historian and a writer, is interpretation. And I think that's really what it's all about is, my books are essentially a mix of the facts of how they're made and then my thematic analysis. And there's nothing true or false about that. It is just my opinion or my interpretation.
Yeah. I love the interpretation aspect of it. I think that's an important thing people need to kind of consider when you think of critics or people that discuss these movies. You got a lot of great behind the scenes voices and interviews involved. What was the research and outreach process like for that?
Well, I've been very lucky in that for my past, this is my 9th or 10th book. I've built up a nice network of contacts, and some of those people know everybody. So, as they've become dear friends to me over the years. So if I needed to reach a certain person, I knew certain people I could ask, or maybe they offered. If I said, I'm working on a Halloween book, and they go, oh, do you want me to introduce you to Dean or Alan, or, something like that would happen.
So cool.
Which was fantastic, and I've been lucky like that. There was very few people I had to kind of cold call. I was able to get an introduction somehow from people I've worked with or people I'm friends with, and the only time I kind of had to go through managers or agents, and again, I knew people who could introduce me, but sometimes you just want to do it officially, and in that case, it was when I first was drawing up my plan for this book, I was thinking, well, should I approach Jamie Lee and John? And I did, and I did it through their people. And both said to come back to them at some stage, because Jamie Lee had just finished doing the rounds of promotion for the Halloween movies, the recent 3. Okay. So she was a little bit kind of need some time.
Yeah.
Call back in a year. John was actually on tour or about to go on tour and come back later. And in that time, I'd started talking to all these other people. And when I thought about going back to Jamie Lee and John, I was like, this is different now. This has become something different.
Yeah.
It has become a different set of voices. And again, as a fan, I've heard all the stories from John,
Right.
Jamie Lee, you know?
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking, well, at this stage now, this is almost like the alternative history.
Right.
Even though some of the people in there have gone on record before in documentaries or whatever. So I kind of thought, well, I don't think I need them now. It's not that I don't need them or didn't want them, but I was happy with where the book was in terms of the voices I had gathered and the stories that they were telling me, that I didn't want to all of a sudden go ask John the same questions he's been asked a million times.
Yeah.
And to put that story in there to dilute the new stuff that I got.
Yeah.
Because the way I look at it is if a fan buys this book, they've heard those stories from John and Jamie Lee before.
100%. And that's what I think. That resonates to me. And I think it comes off as more authentic book. Because it does seem very intentional. You know what I mean? So I instead of just being like a book where it's like, oh, he couldn't get John or Jamie, it very much feels like, no, this is we're looking at this differently. So I think you nailed that.
Thank you very much, man. And it was something I thought, as a fan, if I was buying this book, I don't want to hear those stories again. I want to hear from the guy that, came up with the beautiful visuals of Halloween 4 that never talks about it before, but here he is. And
speaking of these voices, there is a topic that we've talked about on this show. We call it Leafgate, which is that Robert Englund, in a random interview, claimed that he painted the leaves for John Carpenter on set. We are very hesitant. There's never been anyone else that has ever said this. In your research, did you find anything about Leafgate?
I have read it and heard it, but Tommy Lee Wallace did not confirm it.
I've heard some interviews with Tommy Lee Wallace too, and he was kind of like, it was just me and I think like one other person, and very clearly it was like, it was us. We sat there painting the stupid leaves.
You know what? I'm gonna have to ask Robert now if this is true.
You're gonna have to. Just make sure you call it Leafgate though. We're trying to get things. We're trying to hashtag Leafgate.
If he confirms or denies, I will let you know.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. So let me, I'll go back to kind of the approach here. Was there anyone that you really wanted to get that you weren't able to on this?
I would have liked to get Danielle, but again, I know she's been, she's done a lot of interviews, and I met her here in Dublin, briefly, but it was before the book was a thing, so I didn't get a chance to actually ask her then and there. But I think she would have brought a nice perspective, considering she would cover both the kind of the Torn movies, well, 4 and 5, and then Rob Zombie's. So that would have been a nice connection. But again, I wasn't, you see, because again, it comes back to my kind of speed of writing books and my way of doing things, that I don't really linger for too long. If I don't get a response, I might ask a second time, or like with the other guys, go through an agent or manager just to get a second way in. But if I don't, I tend to just move on,
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're very clearly affectionate about the book, or about the movies in your book, but also very analytical. How did you balance that during the writing process? Because I'm sure it's hard to like take out your own, as we talked about before, interpretation or whatever, or thoughts on it, and just write this very clearly. How do you balance something like that?
It is. Do you know what it is? I would say once you talk to the people who make the movies, it gives you a whole different perspective on your experience with them. For example, it's no secret that Halloween 5 is considered one of the lesser of the franchise.
Sure.
And I always watched it since I was 5 years old. I've been watching that movie. And there was something about it when I was that young that didn't quite gel with me. Having experienced part 4, which is instantly brilliant.
Yeah.
There's something different about 5. And for years, I kind of wrestled with it. But once I talked to Rob Draper, the cinematographer, and Dominique, who I love, Dominique is one of my favorite people I've ever spoken to for any book ever. He's such a generous, gregarious person to speak with. But once I spoke to those guys and a couple of other people, it gave me a whole new perspective on the movie because I knew what they had in mind, what they wanted to do. Like Rob would tell me that he was envisaging Orson Welles' Touch of Evil. You know what I mean? Or he was thinking of Citizen Kane and that kind of cinematography. And Dominique would talk about expressionism. When I told him that the movie reminded me of a lot of early German expressionism, he opened up so much because all of a sudden he was like, yes, I didn't go in thinking I want to do a German expressionist movie, but it was in my brain because they influenced me, but you've just kind of articulated it. So things like that, which, blew my mind, that the fact that it was subliminal to him, but it was there. So him and Rob were working, they had these kind of aesthetic touchstones in their mind, going back to old Hollywood and German expressionist silent cinema, which are things I love. So for them to kind of go, yes, that's what we were trying to do, that really was a key in opening up a whole new appreciation for me of that movie in terms of what they were trying to do visually.
Yeah.
Tonally, it's a different movie. It is high contrast. It is a lot of shadows and chiaroscuro. So it is very film noirish and expressionistic. And to me, I have a whole new appreciation of that new movie now. But it's also one of the things I love about the Halloween franchise is that every movie feels different.
Oh, yeah.
It is the work of the collective filmmakers on it. The closest of the two you could put together are, say, Halloween 1 and 2. And that's because you have the continuity element. You have Dean Cundy, who was kind of under orders to make it look as close to the first movie as possible because it's supposed to be the same night. Right. So even though he's working with a different director who had a very different style, Dean was able to say, no, if we're going to do the sequel, John wants us to retain that sense of being the single night. So he had to remember what he did on the first movie in terms of his lighting, his framing, his lenses, things like that.
Yeah. And
I know that kind of detail is probably not what fans are necessarily looking for.
Yeah.
But it really, it really entertained and inspired me because that's, to me, the ingredients of these movies we love. It's why did Dean choose certain lenses or certain techniques, because these are kind of, they're supposed to be invisible, these filmmaking techniques. That's Hollywood. You're not supposed to necessarily notice things on an obvious upfront level. They're supposed to work on you subliminally. And that's what fascinates me. And that's really the key to my writing. That's all of my books. It's about how and what went into making these movies that we love. And that's the side of making this Halloween book that I really enjoyed, was getting into Dean's mind of why he chose to frame things a certain way or shoot them a certain way or light them a certain way. Because if you look at Halloween 3, looks completely different. He's bringing in the Irish, he's playing up the kind of autumnal, the greens, the browns, the orange, So, and yet it's still very identifiably Dean. There's something about his use of the anamorphic lens and where you break the fourth wall with the light, the kind of the lens flare. Mm-hmm. And that's very much Dean. So
that lens flare section that you talked about, the lens flare, was also super interesting, and how you would get fined for it. That was nuts to me. It's so weird to hear that stuff. I love that stuff. Oh man,
actually, one of my best friends is Nick McLean, who is one of the greatest cinematographers in Hollywood history. He kind of him and Vilmos Zsigmond essentially invented that as a stylistic device because they worked on the early Spielberg movies. Now, a lot of the time, people will refer to that as the Spielberg style, but it's because Nick and Vilmos were developing that on the early Spielberg movies. And that was Nick because his father and grandfather were old Hollywood cinematographers. And to them, catching a lens flare is like the sign of an incompetent cameraman. You know what I mean? Because like I say, it breaks the fourth wall. It makes the audience member go, oh, this is a movie. Even though they know they're watching a movie, but you know what I mean? It's like when a character addresses the camera. So Nick and Vilmos, because this was the new Hollywood era where the director really had free reign to break the rules, because it was a different generation. It was the counterculture era. So you had young filmmakers like Spielberg who were able to utilize people like Nick and Vilmos to come up with things that were not traditional. And Nick and Vilmos loved catching lens flares and using them for stylistic purposes.
Yeah.
So if you go back to the Sugarland Express, Spielberg's first movie after Jewel, which wasn't a theatrical, and then you look at it again, they worked on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They really used it there, and that's where it became highly influential. And that's why now when you see the likes of, J.J. Abrams' Super 8 or Stranger Things, and they're basically doing Nick and Vilmos's camera work, but it often gets credited to Spielberg, naturally enough.
So interesting.
But so I was able to kind of tap into all that history of knowing Nick, knowing his history, and of course he knows Dean, and Dean kind of came out of that era slightly after those guys, but he was definitely in the backwash of that kind of new Hollywood stuff.
That's so interesting. I love those like weird old Hollywood rules, like the Hays Code and stuff, like for Hitchcock and stuff, where they had to like navigate these like weird rules that they had in place. I thought that was really cool. Anything that you discovered during this process that that surprised you or changed your understanding of the series? I mean, it sounds like some of the things you talked about already kind of covered that, but
like I say, it was more what I loved about doing the book was rediscovering things in the movies, or discovering things in the movies that I didn't appreciate before. And again, it was from talking to the people who were there and who made them. Like the zombie films were for a long time not movies I particularly liked, especially the second one. I think the level of violence in that is kind of off-putting, But I think the first one, I always liked the first one. I always liked the idea of the subtext, and I liked the thematic stuff that was going on there. Because again, that's, as a film analyst or critic or historian, you're looking for stuff to make the text richer. But examining those films again and talking to Phil, the cinematographer Phil Parliament, it gave me a whole new appreciation of Zombie's efforts on those movies and the trouble he had with the Weinsteins, the pressure that they put on him.
Yeah.
And yet he retained his vision. I mean, when you look at those movies, they are such zombie movies. You know what I mean? They are, like, considering the fact that he was working with Paramount, working with the Weinsteins, and yet he retained his essential aesthetic auteur vision, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, things like that, again, talking to Marianne from The Curse of Michael Myers and Daniel Farns, the writer, and Jesus, the trouble they went through. Well, Daniel went through with the Weinsteins in the studio, and the composers. My God, John Ottman and his situation with the Weinsteins on H20.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, there are things you don't appreciate, or that you don't necessarily know or notice when you're watching these movies for the first time or the first few years. What went into making them these movies that you love, or in some cases don't like? But you go back and you talk to the people, and you hear of the experience and the love and the efforts that went into making these movies. Yeah. It gives you a whole new appreciation when you watch them again. I mean, the next time I watch any of the Halloween movies will be a different experience for me. And that's what's great about doing this job, is that even though I've grown up with all these movies and I've seen them countless times, in some cases dozens upon dozens of times, when I watch them again, they will be new to me. It'll be a whole new experience. And that's the great privilege of being a writer or a film critic, is that you uncover something new in them.
Yeah.
So that's for me one of the great things.
Yeah, it's really cool. We had Brandon Trost on, who was the cinematographer on I think both Halloweens, I want to say. And it was one of those things where it was like, you don't think about anything about the filmmaking of those movies, and those movies are so divisive, and people love them or hate them, sort of. It kind of feels like there's no in between there. And then when you hear Brandon talk about all of these decisions, and really that it was Rob was like, this is what I need from you. And And he told a story about how Rob made him come to his house and they had watched The Devils, and Rob, like, they just sat there and watched it. And then afterwards, Rob was like, that's what I want, like, in Halloween. And Brandon was like, all right, man, I'll try and figure that out. Like,
you can see it. You can see it. It's unflinching. It's hardcore, and it's yeah. I mean, that's the great thing about kind of going back to these kind of touchstones of films that stylistically or emotionally mean something to us. We can kind of transpose that influence into our own art.
yeah,
I love that. I love it. And Halloween 2 is for all what I didn't like about it in terms of the violence and the excess. Visually and aesthetically, it's beautiful. It's a dark masterpiece in terms of cinematography and visual style. And again, the more I wrote about it and the more I revisited it and talked to people about it, I'm like, Zombie had something going here. And I think it didn't live up to the first one. I think the first one was actually quite well realized, as a standalone movie, because he really and effectively brought those teams in there, about the kind of the social milieu of the family.
Yeah, that was great.
I thought it was brilliant, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't like that because it betrays Carpenter's idea of there's no reason.
Right, right.
Blank evil. And I appreciate both sides. And I think that's the great thing. I don't think we have to be one or the other in the film appreciation. We can like both versions of things. It's like a cover song. Sometimes people say, the original is the best, but that doesn't mean you can't appreciate the cover just as much.
Yeah, it's one of my stances has always been like, and producer Lexi was, when we met, she was a staunch anti-remake person. She's probably gonna get on and yell at me and say that's not true. She was. And I told her once, I was just like, you'll always have that one. You'll always have the first one. That you have it. So the remake, who cares? It's just its own thing. Like, just
exactly
appreciate them both. Like one, don't like the other. It's fine. Like, it doesn't do anything to the first one.
No, exactly. And it for those people, say like myself in this case, who want something extra, who want something more to chew on in terms of themes and analysis and stuff like that, Zombies film is great for that. And if you want to look back at Carpenter's film and how he created a masterpiece out of mood and tone and lighting and photography and all this and character, there you go. So, it depends really on what you're looking for as an audience member and the context of that, whether you're a critic or a historian or just purely as a fan. You know what I mean? Both versions are there for you to enjoy or to not enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. So do you feel that the Halloween franchise has evolved in a way that still connects with audiences today, or do you think a lot of it is nostalgia based?
I think there's a bit of both. It's amazing to see, for example, the absolute love of Halloween 3 that I see out there. I mean, for years I was saying this is one of my favorite movies of all time. People are like, Halloween 3? Really? As if like, how dare you say Halloween 3? It
happened like overnight. It was just one day. Everyone was like, Halloween 3 is the worst. And then the next day, it felt like everyone was like, by the way, Halloween 3 is actually the best one. And I was like, wait, what? What just happened? Like, what the fuck?
And it's
did I
so
miss?
unique. I mean, it really, I mean, to me, sometimes it feels like a lost Carpenter movie because it has Carpenter's fingerprints all over. I mean, it's the sound of it. I mean, the score, of course, it's him and Alan Hart. It's just, it feels like one of those films of his of that period, like Prince of Darkness and They Live and Escape from New York. It has a certain tone to it, both visually and audio-wise, that feels very much in the Carpenter vein. So for me, it fits perfectly in that whole early Halloween franchise thing. It doesn't feel that obscure or out there, apart from the obvious reasons. But again, because I came to it first, I didn't think, where's Michael Myers? Michael Myers came second to me after Halloween 3. So, but I'm astounded at the amount of love that's out there. And when I talk to Tommy Lee Wallace, he is equally as astounded with the fan base that's out there. Now you're saying like now people don't have to apologize for liking it anymore. They can just say, I love Halloween 3 and I don't give a crap.
Yeah.
And I also think it's timely as well in terms of, when you look at the the last three movies, the Blumhouse movies.
Yeah.
You know, they were doing stuff in there in terms of Laurie Strode's character, which was very much of the culture and of the time in terms of, you know, there's a lot of female empowerment stuff in there, but it wasn't just for tokenism. They really created a dense, deep character here. And she wasn't just a victim. She was preparing her absolute brilliant counterattack, anticipating it, you know, and she could have been just played as a flawed character, a victim, you know, like to a degree she was in H20, you know, to say, oh, well, she's on pills, she's an alcoholic, and, you know, but when the Blumhouse movies did it, yes, there was an element in there that she was struggling with the trauma of it, but she owned it. She was able to turn it back around on Myers and for herself to become the ultimate heroine, the ultimate hero of this franchise. So it really empowered her a lot. It didn't just make her a victim. It said, no, she's this badass character who's going to take down the ultimate film.
Yeah.
So I think in those terms, you know, in terms of kind of contemporary culture, it kind of hit in on some of that stuff. So,
yeah. Has your relationship with not just these movies, but the horror genre overall changed over the years with these books? Has that changed your relationship with these movies, or is it when you pop them on, is it still just these are great?
It does something strange to you as a fan. And
Yeah.
it's not just with the horror, but with like whether it was the Walter Hill movies, Burt Reynolds movies, Tom DeCillo movies, or whatever it is, or some of the books I wrote on music. You know, you listen back to certain albums or whatever, or certain artists. It does. There's a certain remove, and it's probably the only thing I regret. I don't know if regret is the right word, but the one thing I miss from just being a fan who had no connection to this Hollywood world or whatever, that I can just go into my room on a Friday night with a couple of beers and some snacks and throw on Halloween 3 or 4 and just enjoy them purely and utterly for what they are.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do that now because you know the director or you're friends with the cinematographer or you know the actor, you know, things like that. It does take you out of it slightly, you know, and that's not, it's an amazing thing. My God, this is what I'm doing now. I never thought I would be doing because like I say, I was totally non-academic. I was turned down from every college I ever applied for not being good enough. So to be able to now be in this realm and be published by someone like Bloomsbury, who's a major publisher, publishing a work about this movie I grew up with, it's incredible. So I don't feel that it's a bad thing that now if I throw on Halloween 3, I'm kind of slightly removed from it.
Yeah.
But I do miss it. I do miss just being that fan who just wants to curl up on the couch with a couple of beers and enjoy a movie sometimes. It happens.
Yeah, and now the balance, which is kind of cool too, is you're part of this documented history of this. You yourself are now part of the history of this franchise, which is really cool.
Entirely surreal, man. It really is. And like to be doing interviews like this, or to see reviews coming out online and stuff like that, or to see it mentioned in like IMDb or the Irish Times, you know, these major newspapers or major media outlets. And like sometimes you forget, you'll see, you know, Halloween book, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll see my name attached to the article, you know what I mean? And that's a pinch me moment. That's where I kind of go, Jesus, how far did that fan go? That 5-year-old who was watching Halloween 4 and 5 to now writing a book about them and knowing the people who made them. It is entirely surreal, but, you know, I had a moment last year where I was invited over to Malibu. Again, my friend Nick McLean, the cinematographer, he wanted me to come over as a guest of honor. He wanted to throw a party for me, basically, in his house in Malibu, because I wrote his biography with him. Wow. And he was so happy with that. And it kind of gave him a new appreciation almost, you know, in the kind of film world, because he retired. He was the cinematographer, the director of photography on Friends, the TV show. So he essentially retired after that. And, you know, when you retire in the film business, you kind of fade into obscurity a little bit.
Yeah.
Despite all the huge movies he's done. And, you know, when I did that book, all of a sudden he was back doing interviews. He was doing tours where he was speaking at colleges or at movie theaters, introducing the Goonies or whatever movie it was, Cobra, something like that. So it was almost like a new lease of life. So he really appreciated that, and our friendship is so deep. But he brought me over. I went to Malibu, and I went to this party one day, and he didn't tell me who was coming. No idea. All I knew was I was going to see Nick. And when I got there, about an hour in, I couldn't walk 4 feet in that house without bumping into somebody whose movies I loved growing up.
That's crazy. That's
Whether
crazy.
it was a director, an actor, a cinematographer, somebody. And I just thought this was the most surreal moment of this whole writing career, I think. It was just, how the hell did I get here? How did I, from a small town here in County Kildare in Ireland, and here I am in Malibu, and I'm the guest of honor in this party with all these people I grew up loving. It was absolutely surreal.
That's wild. I'm looking at Nick McLean's credits right now, and this is nuts. We may have to get in touch with Nick because Goonies, Cobra, Short Circuit.
Yeah, and look at his camera operator credits, man, are insane.
So crazy. That's so nuts. And Mac and Me, which
I just did the new version that came out. I was on the audio commentary.
Oh, really?
I just got my copy the other day. It arrived in the post from Vinegar Syndrome.
I'm gonna have to pick that up.
Oh my god, man, it's totally surreal. I mean, it's like, of all the movies of Nick's career, I end up on Mac and Me, but
I'll take it. I mean, that culturally, I mean, that one stands out now thanks to Paul Rudd and Conan O'Brien. I think that one gained
so
a lot more momentum.
Recording that audio commentary was interesting. I do say that, like, my friend Mike O'Shea, who's the camera operator, and Nick, who's the cinematographer, that really fueled my audio commentary. But I will also say there was a couple of Guinness, which it fueled it as well.
Yeah.
So
there always is. So you got, we'll wrap this up here in a minute. I just have like a couple more little things here.
Sure.
Anything next? I know you have the music book coming out, the scores about the American score soundtracks. Anything after that you're planning or looking forward to?
Yeah, I actually have 3 more books in the works right now, which I'm kind of juggling around. So one of them is, I would say, a little bit more academic than I'm used to, because I actually did this deliberately because I wanted kind of a break from these kind of books where it's very intense, where you're interviewing a lot of people. Because I live in Ireland, most of these people live in LA, and that can be very. Sometimes you have to be up in the middle of the night to interview people. So.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do this book, which is essentially, the theme is class and culture in American cinema of the late 20th century. So I'm looking at films from, say, the 60s, 70s, 80s, up into a little bit of the 90s, and looking at depictions of class, essentially. Because I bring a lot of sociological elements to my work. It's something I'm deeply interested in. So as somebody who, from Ireland, where class is very much a thing, to where in America, a lot of people tell me, oh, class isn't really a thing here, but that's part of my thing. I'm looking at it from an Irish perspective.
That's cool.
Sociological perspective, historical perspective. And, I was able to pick my own movies for this, because it's totally on me. It's purely analysis. It's purely critical, kind of thing. It's not a certain set number of movies I have to pick.
Right.
I set the movies that I wanted to analyze. So it's a nice kind of break from things, and it's very low pressure. Like I say, I'm not interviewing anybody, so I don't have any directors telling me, oh no, that's not what I meant by that movie.
Yeah.
So it's purely speculative would be the word. Another book I'm doing is kind of a sequel to my Hired Guns book. I wrote a book with my best friend Amanda Kramer, who is the keyboardist of the Psychedelic Furs. That book was Hired Guns, Portraits of Women in Alternative Music. And we are now working on kind of a sequel to that, which is looking at from the male perspective. So we're looking at they would be well known if you know your music, but like to the general audience, they wouldn't be names as such. So they play with it like major acts and bands, whatever. But what we're doing is, again, it comes back to the sociological thing. We're looking at their backgrounds. We're looking at their education. We're looking at how they made it through the industry to get to this point where they are playing with these huge acts. So they're essentially session musicians. In some cases, they're artists who have had their own bands as well.
Yeah.
But that's really our approach, is kind of detailing their life, their background, and the culture that they grew up in. You know, again, it comes back to a lot of cases, like when you look at Hired Guns, it's a very 50-50 split between those who were kind of middle class and classically trained musically, and those who were working class and who just started in bands early on who had no classical training. So that's really my interest there. So we're doing the follow-up to that from the male perspective. And then only last week, I signed a publishing deal for another franchise, horror franchise book. So, can you tell the franchise or no? You're just keeping I'll give you an exclusive. I'll give you an exclusive. I haven't mentioned this. So it's basically the Living Dead franchise. Oh, that's amazing. There's a lot there, especially if you're going to go into the whole split between George and the other guy. I forget his name, but the producers, yeah. So that's a lot there. There is, and I'm kind of treating it also as a kind of an auteur study on George as well. So I will be going through his career and all of his other movies as well. But really, it's in the context of the Living Dead movies. That's really cool. Yeah, we would do these things. It was like a spoof of like the Serial podcast when that had started. So we called it Serial Killer. And it was like, we'd pick like one topic or one person or one director. And we did it on George Romero. And it was really interesting to follow just his career through movies. It was where he's got that Nights movie where they're on motorcycles and shit. I was like, what the fuck? Yeah. What is happening? And he was able to he had this kind of weird kind of juggling thing going on between these kind of indie movies, independent finance movies, and then he would do the studio stuff. And he was one of those filmmakers that I think, unfortunately to a degree, when he did the studio stuff, there was something a little bit neutered about his style. Yeah. It's like as if he just didn't battle the suits enough to go, fuck you, this is my movie, and this is the way I do things. Like, say, if you look at Land of the Dead, which was a Universal movie and produced by, Mark Canton, Neil Canton, who I know Neil, so I'll be talking to him about it. But it's a very different style to Day, which was before it, and then Diary, which was after it. It's very much a mainstream commercial movie, and it's done in that invisible style of such. Yeah. But then you go and look at Diary, which is this, handheld kind of found footage thing, and it's completely would never be made by Universal. No. Well, that's awesome, man. I can't wait. You'll have to have you back on for that. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to have you back on for anything. Oh, cheers. I said, if I can confirm with Robert about his Leaf Gate involvement, I will let you know. Please do. We also have a working theory that is not, there's zero evidence at this point, but if you want to take it, we think that maybe everyone knows, did Steven Spielberg direct Poltergeist or did Tobe Hooper direct Poltergeist? What if Steven Spielberg was like, you do Poltergeist, or I'll do Poltergeist to put your name on it, and you're going to do Jaws and put my name on it. Did Tobe Hooper direct Jaws is our working theory. Zero evidence, but we're working on it. That's the kind of seed of conspiracy theory that I love. We were like, let's just toss it out there, and if we say it enough, maybe it'll just somehow start infiltrating the internet. What's the word for those things where all of a sudden people think that something happened, but it never actually did? The Mandela effect. Effect. Yeah. That would be awesome if I created a Mandela effect. It'd be my life's work. Do you have? This is the last one. Do you have a ranking of these Halloween movies? A loose one. I mean, I've been asked by various publications, to do rankings before. Sure. I would say it probably changes from week to week, but I do have a definitive core. Interesting. Yeah. That I can give you. Maybe a top 5. Yeah. Okay, so I have to go Halloween 3. It's of course it's number 1. It's number 1. Halloween, of course. 78, Carpenter. Halloween 4. Okay. Damn. Halloween 2. Okay. I'm very glad you put Halloween 2 in there. That's another one that I feel like kind of flipped. I feel like everyone loved 2 for a while, and then suddenly people really do not like that movie at all. And I love it. I think it's awesome.
I'll be honest, and I know people hate me for all my thoughts on Halloween, but I think 2 might be better than 1. I like 2 so much. I love it. It
You know what?
melts my brain.
Love a good. I find it very hard now to just watch part 1 by itself. I will watch the 2 of them.
Yeah.
It feels like It feels like one long, great 3-hour movie in a way.
Yeah.
You know? And that's why
I agree with that.
There's also something. There's something about the hospital setting of 2. When I watched it when I was a kid, I used to rent it on VHS. There was something a bit. Not seedier is the wrong word, but Halloween 1 is pure class. It's so elegant the way it's filmed. It's perfect. But Halloween 2 has a certain element of the B movie about it.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure.
It's beautifully shot by Dean again, but there's something that brings it back to a more standard genre horror movie that Halloween 1 is above, because Halloween 1 is just so artistically perfect. You know? And I love that about Halloween 2, that there is something grittier about it, that there's something more genre about it. It's very hard to put into words, but you feel it.
No, that's a great point, because my truly my favorite movies are always the ones that do feel subversive, where you're like, should I be watching this? You know, like when you're a kid, you're like, I don't know if this is for me. Like this is intense. So that would make a lot of sense, because that's generally the ones I gear towards, is when you feel like a little dirty watching it. Like
and
Texas Chainsaw. What was that?
I think I might throw one in out of left field as well, because again, I do like it when I watch it. I really, really enjoy it, and it's for the similar reasons as part 2, in that and why I love Halloween Kills of the last 3 as well. That it feels like it's just trying to be a really good sequel. It's not trying to be, thematically important or even stylistically amazing, but it functions as a great.
Okay. I'm trying to remember Kills, because that was the COVID one, I feel like, right? That was.
For instance, Halloween 3 with the masks in the
playground. Yes.
Purely carnage, which I don't normally like. I don't like too much blood and guts, for no particular reason. So it worked though. It just functioned as this fun filler sequel, and I kind of look at The Curse of Michael Myers as something like that as well. As a continuation, the Torn trilogy, and sometimes with horror movies. That's what we want. We want just a good enough sequel. We don't necessarily want a masterpiece every time out of the gate.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
But like I say, ask me next week and that 5 could change.
Rob's remakes have also infiltrated my top list, because that first one is just really, really cool. Just the way he took that. But so Wayne, the book comes out maybe August 7th, maybe September 4th. So pre-order it now. It's already on Amazon, so you can check it out in the US for sure. And the publisher's website is what's the website for them?
It's Bloomsbury, basically. I'm not sure.
Bloomsbury.com. Google it.
So depending on what country you're in, there's Bloomsbury.com or there's Bloomsbury, I think, .co.uk, and then Australia as well. They all have their Bloomsbury are all over the place. So they're, So but I do recommend pre-ordering, because whatever the date they release it, you'll get it straight away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was awesome. It was a great read. I couldn't recommend it more. It was definitely worth it. So Wayne, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Let's get you back on as soon as those other books drop. Anything you want to promote, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Sean. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it also, man. Have a good one.
Thank you.